Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith, and today I have a real beef with the UK migrant crisis. In fact, I have a real beef with illegal immigration and globalism as a whole. So we'll talk about that when we come back, but do me a favor. While we're on the break, would you hit that like and subscribe button? Thanks a lot. We'll see you in a few.
Join me, Don Keith, in my quest for truth and answers to all my beefs here on The Real Beef.
All right, welcome back, folks. All right, today I have a really important topic to discuss, and that is the UK migrant crisis and the mass importation of immigrants into first world countries from third world countries, really as a whole. And so today I want to talk about the relationship between globalism and illegal immigration. Now, yesterday I posted our brief 2-minute take on this topic, and to kind of get my point across, I used mobile devices and social media as a quick example of how globalist capitalism and immigration are related. Because almost everyone in Western civilization has access to some type of device, either an iPhone or an iPad or a computer, right? It's a way that we can connect to the modern world in order to communicate like we have really never been able to communicate before in history. But these devices are also ways for those of us who live in countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, countries like Germany and France and Australia, and other what we refer to commonly as first world countries. These devices are a way for us to participate in the free market as modern consumers. I mean, think about it. We no longer have to leave the comfort of our favorite chair to order a pizza or the refrigerator to store the leftovers. We can order them both right from our cellular devices. How convenient. But the convenience works both ways. It works for us to make our lives easier, but it also makes it easier for producers of the goods and services we buy to advertise and sell their products. And so since the age of modern technology with the internet and mobile devices, the free market has really benefited like never before in history. I mean, billion-dollar corporations are commonplace now thanks to these innovations. But because these devices are so easy to obtain and access to retail stores is also relatively easy with stores like Walmart in the U.S. or Asda in the United Kingdom, we as consumers already have these means of buying the items we need. So the producers and the sellers, they already have a lock on us. We're already included in their future business models as part of their revenue streams. So in order for these huge corporations to find new revenue sources, they either have to wait on the birth rate of the country they operate in or the legal immigration policies of those countries to change or suit their needs. So the corporations are faced with a dilemma. How can we take our growth, which can only rise and fall based upon the appetite of the consumer we already own, how do we find a way to increase that growth exponentially? Well, we can't really create a new consumer out of thin air, and we can't clone one because that would be a human rights violation. So what do? Well, what about people in countries that don't have the ease of access to the modern conveniences and free market that we have in our first world countries? What if we import immigrants from third world war-torn countries or impoverished countries like Iran and Afghanistan and Syria, Somalia? Because we can't very well open stores in Tehran and Kabul because those places hate us, right? Now, we could import the people from those places and then give them jobs. Then they could purchase our products with the money they earn from those jobs, and they could also contribute to the GDP and tax revenue of the country that imports them. And since they would potentially contribute to the economic growth of that country that imports them, we can probably get our globalist politician pals on board with open borders and mass illegal immigration policies. Open borders policies.
Well, you know, Gary, that sounds like a hell of an idea, but it also sounds very expensive to get those immigrants over here. How will we ever pay for it all?
Well, Jim, I'll tell ya, we're going to get the citizens of the countries that are importing the illegal immigrants to pay for it all with their hard-earned tax dollars. You see, folks, that's what it's all about. It's about the integration of the global market so that things like border controls and constitutional laws or policies don't stand in the way of governments and corporations' quest for that almighty dollar. But I want to give you more than just my take on what's going on because, opinions are like everybody's got one, right? I mean, take it from a guy who's a lot smarter than me, a guy named Davis Hanson. Now, Dr. Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute and appears quite frequently on Fox, so you might have heard of him before. And I like this quote from Dr. Hanson particularly because it encompasses not just one country, but many of ours who are experiencing this, basically a willingness of our leaders to just give our countries away. So here's what he said, and this was in a Real Clear Politics piece in 2007, and it was entitled The Global Immigration Problem. He said, thousands of aliens crossing our 2,000-mile border from an impoverished Mexico reflect a much larger global one-way traffic problem. In Germany, Turkish workers, both legal and illegal, are desperate to find either permanent residence or citizenship. Londonistan is slang for New London of thousands of unassimilated Pakistani nationals. In France, there were riots in 2005 because many children of North African immigrants are unemployed, and unhappy Albanians flock to Greece to do farm work and then are regularly deported for doing so illegally. And the list goes on and on. So why do millions of these border crossers head to Europe, the United States, or elsewhere in the West? It's easy. Stable democracies and free markets ensure economic growth, rising standards of living, and thus lots of jobs. While these countries' birth rates and native populations fall, in contrast, immigrants usually flee mostly failed states that cannot offer their people any real hope of prosperity and security. So this quote pretty much sums up everything I talked about above with the exception of assimilation. And that, my friends, is probably the most egregious part of this whole scheme by our politicians who are willingly ushering in a people with an ideology completely antithetical to that of Western civilization. And this is especially true in the United Kingdom, as mentioned above by Dr. Hanson. This influx of Pakistani Islamists who refuse to assimilate. Okay, these guys began mass migrating to the UK decades ago, many of whom who are now assaulting and violating the white Christian children, young boys and girls of the country that was charitable enough to give them refuge. Now, if you don't believe me, you can just Google all about the grooming gangs of the UK. You'll be able to pull up article after article of different Pakistani men who have been convicted of violating these young white or Christian boys and girls. I mean, it's sickening, folks. But just like here in the U.S., the liberal Marxist media, social media, and politicians, they try to hide these atrocities as much as possible. Okay, and they'll also try to silence any voices who try to speak out about these heinous crimes. And there are really very few who are willing to speak out because, as you all know, the greatest weapon of the left is the cry of racism, right? So that if a white person speaks about crimes committed by persons of color, they are immediately castigated and labeled Islamophobe or racist. But thank goodness there are still heroes who are willing to speak out. People like Katie Hopkins and Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson. Tommy's the guy who was arrested, convicted, and sent to prison for simply reporting about these grooming gangs. You see, there is a radical arm of a religious ideology called Islam. Not the religion itself, but this radical arm that is counter to the values of Christianity, an arm that believes they are supposed to either convert, subjugate, or slaughter the unbeliever who refuses the tenets of Islam. Whereas in Christianity, we believe that God gave us free will to choose to worship him or not. And while we Christians do prefer everyone be Christian, we don't go around converting people by force, at least not today. Okay, and I have to throw that out there because there's always some nut job who's going to bring up the Spanish Inquisition or some medieval times crap. Now, I'm talking about today and the here and now. There are still barbarians in the world who seek to convert people to their religious ideology by force. You guys ever hear of a little group called ISIS? Well, that's some of the same people that the UK is allowing back into their country. In fact, most recently, an ISIS bride, her name was Shamima Begum, she's been petitioning the UK government to gain re-entry into Britain after she fled the country and married an ISIS soldier in Syria.
I think a lot of people should have sympathy towards me for everything I've been through. When I But I didn't know what I was getting into when I left, and I just was hoping that maybe for the sake of me and my child, they let me come back.
This is the same girl who said beheadings are okay because Islam allows them. And the courts in the UK are actually going to let her plead her case because one of the justices there said that her right to fairness was more important than the national security of the United Kingdom. More politics. But this is more than just one problem of this ISIS bride, folks. These migrants are flooding into the UK in droves, most coming in by boat or ferry from France by way of the English Channel, many of whom are even being escorted by French naval vessels. I mean, so what in the hell is going on? Where in the hell is Boris Johnson? I mean, this was a guy who was supposed to be the British Donald Trump. He was going to make Brexit happen. They were going to leave the EU, not have to adhere to EU policies and open borders. Look at him now. He got elected. Okay, he's now prime minister. What's he doing? Absolutely nothing, it looks like. You know, all of these politicians just want a virtue signal to the Marxists rioting in the streets who are protesting about non-existent systemic racism. You know, they want to make the issue of the day about an inanimate Edward Colson statue. Meanwhile, the mothers and the fathers of Great Britain are picking up the pieces of their broken sons and daughters who are being raped and assaulted by the very people their government is welcoming into their neighborhoods. I mean, shame on all of you people in Parliament. Globalist capitalists disguised as socialists, making policies that increase the wealth of corporations rather than benefiting the people. Boris Johnson is no Donald Trump. I mean, they might have the same hair. But that's about as far as it goes. But I don't want to be too hard on Boris. I know the guy has to navigate the waters of Parliament, you know, like Trump has to navigate our Congress. But a little more piss and vinegar is going to be necessary because I'm not hearing the outrage that needs to be heard for the crimes being committed against the citizens of his country. Now, one piece of good news I did see just today, Mr. Johnson saying that by the end of the year, Britain would no longer be bound by the EU laws and they could change their immigration policy. So let's just hope that gets here soon. But as far as the United States goes, just look at some of the numbers, okay, and the cost of legal immigration. Now, according to FAIR, or the Federation for American Immigration Reform, illegal immigrants in America are a net consumer of taxpayer benefits worth more than $100 billion per year. Okay? And according to the Center for Immigration Studies, 31% of illegal immigrant families are on food stamps. At least 50% are on welfare. They get state-funded benefits and cash assistance in many states, as well as free medical care. And that $100 billion cost doesn't even include the cost of border security. You know, not to mention, our genius ex-president gave them all taxpayer-funded cell phones, complete with data and internet. Okay, so if you don't think the governments of the world are in cahoots with the corporations, listen to this.
When we were first talking about doing this, a lot of people actually were worried that it was going to be a problem for Facebook, right? And I just decided, I think that this is too important of an issue for the country. I mean, there are 11 million undocumented people who came here to work hard and contribute to the country. And you know, I don't think it's quite as polarized as people always say.
What would be your advice to the people in D.C. who are trying to balance these two almost diametrically opposed positions? One is immigration policy is about what you're talking about. Let's bring in our human potential. And the other one is let's find a way to get them out. How, if you had to enter that, this is your new team. You have to make these Democrats and Republicans come together. What advice do you think you'd have that's not going on down there now?
Well, I can't really tell anyone how to legislate, right? I mean, that's everyone understands this stuff way better than I do. So, you know, my goal in this is just to try to help support folks who care deeply about getting this done on both sides, and hopefully we can make a difference.
In terms of the politics of it, you think it's just important enough where you're going to do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some things in life that if you believe that it's such a big problem, you just stick your neck out and try to do it, right? And I mean, a lot of people think that it's going to be really challenging to connect 5 billion people too. It is, but I think it's one of the biggest problems of my generation to get everyone in the world to have internet access.
To get everyone in the world to have internet access.
Okay, so you have Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of the wealthiest social media corporation in the world, who then teams up with Bill Gates, the founder of one of the richest software, phone, and app developers in the world. They form an organization called Forward.us, whose really their sole goal is to lobby for massive immigration reform. Okay, and the president of the most powerful nation in the world gave every single illegal immigrant a phone to access the products of those individuals who are pushing for that immigration reform. So guys, if you really want to know what's going on in the world, I invite you to look at the leadership in your country. Try to find a relationship between the giant corporations in your country and your politicians, because I couldn't begin to reveal them all here. They're just way too many. Okay, and this is not hyperbole or conjecture, and it's not conspiracy theory. You just heard Mr. Zuckerberg himself tell you he wants to connect 5 billion people to the internet. Okay, whatever happened to just food and water and feeding the hungry, clothing the poor? Okay, now it's about getting them the internet? I mean, it makes it absolutely no sense to me. But I guarantee you, if you go find one of the hungry Somalian children with the distended bellies, if you give them a choice between a cell phone and a bowl of rice, I bet you they choose the bowl of rice every time, because that's what they need to survive. I mean, give everyone the internet. That's our goal. That's what we as taxpayers need to pay for, the internet. Sad times, ladies and gentlemen, sad times. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me today. I appreciate you guys all watching. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, would you please hit the subscribe button under this video so we can continue to share our conservative message? Thanks again for watching. I'm Don Keith, and this has been The Real Beef.
Join me, Don Keith, in my quest for truth and answers to all my beefs here on The Real Beef.